truth to be self-evident. All men and women created by go. You know the thing.
What is the status of the funding for the World Health Organization?
We're going to be talking about that very soon. I'm getting a full report. I'm not happy with the World Health Organization. Not happy with the World Trade Organization either. We've been ripped off by everybody, and we have, this country, for so many years, has been ripped off by everybody, whether it's the World Health or World Trade. They're like, I call them the Bobbsey twins. They look at our country. For years and years, we had people that did nothing about it. We're doing a lot about it. So we'll have a report, and we're also talking about the World Trade Organization. But we've made a lot of progress there. We're now winning cases for the first time because they know I'll leave if we don't get treated fairly. This country, our country, was at a point where we rarely, if ever, won the lawsuits within the World Trade Organization. But now we're winning a lot of them because they know I'm not playing games. We will pull out if we have to. We just won a $7 billion lawsuit, which was very nice.
Do you expect a decision this week on cutting funding for the WHO?
Yeah, I would say by the end of the week I'm going to make a decision on that. Yeah. There's right now there's a lot of things happening.
On China, why are there no consequences for China for the misinformation
How do you know
that
there are no
shared?
consequences?
We've been asked it.
How do you know there are no consequences?
What are the consequences, Mr. President?
I wouldn't tell you. China will find out. Why would I tell you?
People are concerned that they stonewall.
No, you started off by saying, why are there no consequences?
A few times. So follow up on your response. Why are there no consequences?
How do you know there are no consequences? You're going to find out. I wouldn't tell you. You'd probably be the last person on earth I'd tell. Go ahead.
From the earliest days of the coronavirus outbreak, honest people who were paying attention noticed something strange about this epidemic. This mysterious new virus did not arise in the way you'd think it might from some obscure, lightly populated place, an African rainforest or a remote Indian village. It came instead from the middle of a city of 11 million people, Wuhan, China. Now, you may never have heard of Wuhan, but it was well known to researchers around the world because it was home and is home to one of only a few dozen advanced level 4 biolabs on the planet. The Wuhan laboratory was used for research on some of the deadliest pathogens known to man. As it happens, this facility was not far from the so-called wet market where the coronavirus supposedly originated. Kind of an amazing coincidence if you think about it. Was it actually a coincidence, or was there a connection between the research lab and the outbreak? It seemed like a question worth asking. Unfortunately, we live in a political climate in which asking questions is greatly discouraged and obedience is prized. And so speculation about this remained private, mostly online. And then in February, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas said it out loud.
A few miles away from that food market is China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that researches human infectious diseases. Now, we don't have evidence that this disease originated there, but because of China's duplicity and dishonesty from the beginning, we need to at least ask the question to see what the evidence says. We have such laboratories ourselves in the United States run by our military, in large part done for preventative purposes, or trying to discover vaccines, or to protect our own soldiers.
Well, of course, everything about Tom Cotton's questions, the one you just saw, were valid. Was there a connection between the lab and the virus? We ought to see where the evidence leads, as he said. But the people who are paid to follow the evidence refused to do that, and instead they mocked Cotton as a paranoid lunatic. On CNN, serial plagiarist Fareed Zakaria dismissed Cotton as a, quote, far-right conspiracist. Zakaria compared Cotton's entirely legitimate questions to Soviet disinformation from the 1980s that claimed the CIA invented AIDS.
Tom Cotton, one of Donald Trump's staunchest allies in the Senate, suggested that the virus might have originated in a high-security biochemical lab in China. In the 1980s, I remember when the far left trafficked in rumors about HIV having been invented in CIA labs. The far right has now found its own virus conspiracy theory.
We choose science over fiction. We choose truth over facts.
These people are sick.
What a mediocrity. What a slander. Over at an NBC, famed journalist Brian Williams also refused to engage in journalism. Rather than spend 10 minutes learning about the subject and making up his own mind, Williams simply joined the herd of other dumb people mocking a story they didn't understand.
Cotton has been criticized by public health professionals for giving just a whiff of credibility there on television and on social media to a conspiracy theory going around that the coronavirus originated and was perhaps man-made inside a lab in China, perhaps even as a bioweapon, and was released either intentionally or unintentionally deployed. There is no evidence to support that.
There is no evidence to support that. Sounds authoritative. Actually, Brian Williams had no idea what he was talking about. At the time he said that, the evidence indeed was accumulating. The Wuhan wet market they're always citing, it turns out it didn't even sell the variety of bats that carry COVID-19. Those bats were hundreds of miles away. A group of Chinese researchers confirmed this fact in January when they interviewed 59 people who worked in the market or shopped there. And that information was widely available. It was online when Williams made what he calls his broadcast and issued the airy dismissal you just saw. He just didn't bother to read any of it. None of them did. Tonight, Williams and all the little robots like him owe you an apology.
How dare you?
Shame on you.
And the only cure for that Trump derangement syndrome is 4 more years.
Fox's special reporters confirmed that government sources with access to highly classified intelligence, informed people, believe this virus did in fact originate in the biolab in Wuhan. The first infected patient was likely a lab employee who accidentally contracted the virus and then spread it to the rest of the world. That wet market theory, it was just a cover. China pushed that story to Western media to deflect blame from itself, and of course our press corps, as they always do, ate it up immediately. We still do not know conclusively this virus escaped from a lab in Wuhan. But tonight we can say with ample evidence that it is the most plausible explanation for the epidemic now wrecking our country. And that's a big story. Why didn't we know this sooner? Well, there's a specific reason for that. The people who bring you the news were lying about it, and they were covering for China. In February, the New York Times announced that Senator Tom Cotton repeats fringe theory of coronavirus origins. According to the Washington Post, quote, Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus conspiracy theory that was already debunked. Really? By whom? On March 5th, Vox.com weighed in, quote, rumor is the coronavirus started in a Chinese lab. Here's how we know it didn't. In their signature smug, haranguing tone, Vox said, quote, on Fox News and social media, a dangerous conspiracy theory about the origin of coronavirus won't die. Why was it dangerous? They never explained. As proof the coronavirus could not have escaped from that lab in Wuhan, Vox said that the lab had the same safety protocols as top American labs, meaning naturally the virus just couldn't escape. It was unthinkable to them that maybe China's safety practices might be different from ours and perhaps inferior. This is mindless, this is dishonest, this is infuriating. This story matters. They intentionally obscured it. In fact, State Department emails from 2018, 2 years ago, revealed that the Wuhan lab had disastrous safety practices. Even then, American officials worried that a deadly virus might escape from that lab due to Chinese incompetence. They put that on paper. But Vox, meanwhile, was quoting the World Health Organization's Bruce Aylward to assure you that any such talk was crazy and immoral and probably racist. This is the same Bruce Aylward, by the way, who has now become a professional shill for the government of China. In one interview that we played a couple weeks ago, Aylward refused even to acknowledge the existence of the nation of Taiwan. Why? Because his masters in Beijing might disapprove.
How dare you?
Fox's article on the Wuhan lab ended this way, quote, we'll need to be patient for Chinese investigators to get to the bottom of it. Right. Let's let China do the reporting for us because they're objective. It's hard to believe any of this is real, but it is real, and we shouldn't be surprised by it. These are dogmatic defenders of the Chinese government posing as American journalists. They're the very same people who promote travel bans to North Carolina, then fly off to Beijing for green energy conferences. These are the ones who run Central Committee press releases as news, as CNN did yesterday, and kill stories critical of the Chinese government, as Bloomberg has more than once. They censor movies and silence their own employees to keep China happy. Hollywood specializes in that. And they filled our universities with the offspring of Chinese oligarchs, displacing our own children. They've outsourced our prosperity across the Pacific Ocean, and they've gotten rich while doing it. So of course they're repeating China's lies about this pandemic. They've been training for this for years. Will they be punished? We don't know, but remember their names. You should also remember the people who told the truth about all of this when it was unfashionable to do so. And Stephen Mosher is one of them. He was on this story months ago.
Well, I think it escaped from the lab because we have the Chinese government basically telling us that it did. Wuhan is the only level 4 laboratory in all of China. So that's where you would put a dangerous pathogen. Whether you were genetically engineering it to be a weapon or not, that's where you would be experimenting on it. So it makes sense that the epicenter of the epidemic, that the lab there would be the source of that virus.
Stephen Mosher awaits an apology from Fareed Zakaria. Meantime, he is the president of the Population Research Institute. He's author of Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to the World Order. He joins us tonight. Mr. Mosher, thanks so much for coming on. Since you have been, I think, one of the most informed researchers on this question, and now you've been to some large extent vindicated, tell us what we know right now about the origins of this virus.
Well, we all know now that a bat, solitary bat, did not fly 600 miles from its cave dwelling in another province to the city of Wuhan and land in someone's suit. Everybody now agrees, except for a few marginals, that it escaped from a so-called high containment laboratory. I have to chuckle when I say high containment because obviously it failed at what it was supposed to do. It wasn't level 4, it was operating at level 2. But you know, now the question becomes, was it a naturally occurring horseshoe bat coronavirus that was isolated in the Wuhan Institute of Virology and then accidentally escaped from the lab by infecting a lab worker? Or was it a virus that the researchers there were working on using gain-of-function technology? Gain-of-function means that you take an existing coronavirus and you make it more infectious and more deadly. Now, why would you ever engage in gain-of-function research? Why would you ever seek to enhance a natural pathogen in this way to make it more deadly and more infectious? Well, the idea of the scientists, when they first discovered that they could do these things easily by using recombinant technology, was this. We're going to create superbugs in the lab, and we're going to figure out how to defeat them. We're going to develop in theory, we're going to develop vaccines, we're going to develop therapeutic treatments, and so when the real superbug comes on the scene, we will be ready for it. Well, that's all well and good. That's all fun and games until you create a superbug in the lab and it escapes before you have a chance to develop a vaccine or a therapeutic treatment for it. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, and I'm not saying this is a bioweapon. Quit changing the subject, which is what the other side loves to do.
Exactly.
I'm just saying, was it tinkered on in the lab? And we know that the lab director at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who was their team leader for virology research, was a woman named Dr. Shi, full Chinese name Dr. Shi Zhangli, who has been using a gain-of-function research for years to create new, more deadly, and more infectious coronaviruses.
These people are sick.
So Dr. Shi needs to tell us what she was doing and how she was doing it. The Chinese Communist Party needs to release the secret records of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and then we will all know for sure whether this was a coronavirus in the lab that escaped, whether they were tinkering on it in any way. Now, I'm not naive in all this. I know that China will probably have already destroyed the records, research records of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Right. They've been destroying records left and right already. They probably already warned Dr. Shi Zhangli that she is not to talk to anyone about her research. They've warned other people. So I don't think we're ever going to have what people are demanding, hard evidence, because the Chinese Communist Party has already destroyed that.
Well, of course. And there's a reason they bought and paid for the World Health Organization. It's becoming clear. Mr. Mosher, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It was fascinating. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you, Tucker.
So the question of where the coronavirus originally came from, a lab or a wet market,
It comes from China. It comes from China.
Isn't some irrelevant fact interesting only to specialists? It's not going to be the answer to a Jeopardy question in 20 years. It's meaningful right now. Here's one reason. If this virus came from a wet market, then the pandemic was at least a natural disaster. But if this disaster began in the lab, if it escaped from the lab, it's a completely different thing. It is a man-made disaster. If it escaped due to Chinese mismanagement and then spread because China was determined to cover it up, it's something else completely. In 1984, a Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, had a gas leak famously. Almost 4,000 people died, maybe more. Tens of thousands were sickened and injured. Union Carbide, in the end, paid almost $1 billion adjusted to settle damages from that disaster. If it turns out that China's lies and secrecy and incompetence have killed more than 150,000 people worldwide, then that's very different. Trillions of dollars in economic damages. This could trigger a full-scale global depression. That would suggest that maybe the rest of the world is due a settlement from China. Will our leaders begin asking about this? Maybe they should. Brett Baer hosts Special Report and was behind yesterday's news, which forms the basis of our open tonight. Brett, first of all, thank you for that, to you and your team, for digging up that information, which I think is really significant. Where do you think it'll lead from here?
Well, a couple things. Tucker, if more sources today saying there is a full-scale investigation, and while the intel is not conclusive, as we reported, that there is more open source and classified material pointing to the Wuhan lab. Now, not as a bioweapon, but as a mistake, a sloppy effort that was warned about, as you mentioned in these cables 2 years ago. Where does it go from here? There are already lawmakers talking about possible payback, and what does that look like? I mean, there are a lot of different options, and this, by the way, is bipartisan concerns about what this looks like. While it's inconclusive about the lab part of it, there is high confidence and 100% conclusion that China covered up the early stages of this virus on the ground to an amazing extent and could have changed the dynamic around the world. So what's the big thing that they could do? Well, they could amend the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act and allow class action lawsuits against China, the CCP, the Communist Party. And believe it or not, there are already, Tucker, tonight, 2 class action lawsuits filed in the United States District Court in Miami against the CCP. There'd have to be a change, and Congress would look at that. You're already seeing bills about pulling back manufacturing and the pharmaceutical industry, but that could be expanded to other aspects. And there would be an effort to make China feel some pain for their actions, whatever it turns out to be at the beginning.
So let me ask you a final question. Since you follow this for a living and you're there in Washington, do you think this is the beginning of a sea change in the attitudes of our leaders in Washington toward China?
I do. I think it's not just our leaders, but leaders around the world are going to take another look at the relationship with China. The thing that complicates it this year is the election. And how will Joe Biden and Democrats fashion this, and kind of, will they try to say that we need to be friendlier to China to get things done? I don't know how that's going to come down politically, but clearly it's raising a lot of eyebrows on Capitol Hill.
It sounds like it is. Really important reporting. Thank you for that. Brett Baer.
comes from China. It comes from China.